Oh, don't know if this is still working. Okay. Ah, God, what a fucking life this is, right? That we have to live. Uh, so much going on in the world, so much destruction, and people are, they want to do something, but they're not sure what to do. And I would first like to point out that I just got a new publication from Germany called 20 Years of Whistleblowing. Yeah. Uh, and here I am. Gave me 17 pages. And this is how they honor me and my companions who are mentioned in this. Brandon Bryant, Staff Sergeant, MQ-1 Predator Sensor Operator, SEER Instructor Trainee, U.S. Air Force Joint Special Operations Command, 3rd Special Operations Squadron, disabled Iraq and Afghanistan veteran, founder of Project Red Hand. Sean Westmoreland, Senior Airman, RF Transmission Systems, USAF CENTCOM, 73rd Expeditionary Air Control Squadron, disabled Afghanistan veteran, Project Red Hand Sustainable Technology Director. Stephen Lewis, Senior Airman, MQ-1 Bravo Predator Sensor Operator, U.S. Air Force Joint Special Operations Command, 3rd Special Operations Squadron, Iraq, Afghanistan veteran. Michael Haas, Senior Airman, MQ-1 Bravo Predator Sensor Operator Instructor, U.S. Air Force Air Combat Command, 15th Reconnaissance Squadron, Iraq, Afghanistan veteran. Good job, boys. We were we did our best, you know. Fuck. I tried to tell people this for years. All the stuff going on over in the Middle East right now is a religious conflict, and it's a religious conflict started by people who want to fulfill a prophecy of a book from thousands of years ago. Where people are saying, well, this is prophecy. Well, no, it's not. They're literally trying to fulfill it themselves. These Zionists who claim to be Jews are not Jews. They're converted to the faith. But the more that I read of the history, I really truly believe that the Ethiopian Jews are probably the true tribe that's talked about. And I would definitely like to see their Bible and read through it or have it taught to me at some point. Because I look at, so I see this through the lens of, so growing up, there were a bunch of Zionists who would come to the churches that I was a part of, really church. And towards the end of my life, my grandfather was convinced that he was either going to meet the Messiah returned or the Messiah returned was going to be born in his lifetime. And I mean, I guess I didn't really care for that. I was too busy like reading books and playing video games and playing sports and I was a believer. I grew up in the church. But you know, my grandfather was a William Caswell Bryant was a doctorate of theology and really instructed me my whole life. And so when I look back at those things, like I learned about Jesus and what other people thought about him through like Sunday school, right? And when my grandfather would preach, like my favorite sermon was when my grandfather would preach the Sermon on the Mount. You know, blessed are those who thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. I mean, I could even pull it up, and I could give you a short Sermon on the Mount. And so it's not like I disbelieve Christ or the divinity of his knowledge or the spirit within him. And my grandfather would say, well, Jesus did what he did for everybody. Like it's basically like restoring the bridge between the human spirit and God. Like God is like, if you think about it from like an occultist point of view, like if or an alchemical point of view, like if God created this world as like a realm of change and temporariness and free will, infinite, the ability to make a choice, like my grandfather would say, God loved us so much that he created us that so that we could deny him to his face and his love would not change, right? And that is the faith of God. um and so Christ's act was the act of uh, uh, restoring the bridge between humanity and God, right? The spiritual bridge. Um, the Muslims don't believe that Christ suffered and died, that he was rescued, and the Christians believe that he was crucified and the Messiah. And so like I did a lot of searching for like who this Messiah figure is around the world. And to the Hindus, it's just the Dash avatar, like the supreme God, the preserver. Like they think that some people think that Shiva, Brahma, and Vishnu are different, but they're the same being. They're Trinity. They're just different reflections of the same being. One's a creator, one's a preserver, and one's the destroyer. And they all have their different jobs within the divine panorama. But in the Hindu mythology, whenever mankind is led astray and materialism is rampant, then God reincarnates himself amongst the humans to destroy the wicked, protect the righteous, and to establish the kingdom of God. Um, and so to say that Christ is, but okay. So in my further search, I found out that the avatar actually might be different than the Messiah figure. And so, like, in my own philosophy of Taoism, I've gotten really into the yin yang, the yin yang priests. The Tao is just like, to me, it's just in alignment with God in the highest, and in alignment with all things. Um, and so, in that alignment, just as water flows down the hill, so are we in alignment with the Spirit of God to be able to uh, um, represent Him on this earth, right? As His creation. The alchemists say that, um, or in fact, even the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna says, when a man does an act with his mind in full devotion and service to God, then he is in unity with God, right? And even the Muslims have a thing about water where the Quran is just like water upon parched earth, restoring uh, the earth with uh, water and wisdom and those types of things. And the Taoists would say that we are that. The Quran might be the word as given by their prophet, but we must represent that then, right? We must become the water that is given, right? And so we must be the ones to restore the earth. Though we carry the spirit or word of God, we must be the ones to do the work upon this earth. Um, And if that brings me all the way to the parables of Christ, like when Christ talks about the work, like the workers who come in late and still get paid as much as the people who had been working from the beginning, and the master's like, hey, the work needs to be done, and the deal is that even if you come at the last minute and do the work at the last minute, you still get paid the same, right? Because you're all of a sudden doing the right thing. And in the Bhagavad Gita, that's also reinstated as the greatest sinner can become the greatest saint. As soon as like they realize and become in alignment with the spirit, then we can start acting from wisdom from within. Like the and I try to talk to some I always try to talk to religious folks about like finding the commonality. We're sitting here arguing over whose religion is the best, and every single religion, the mystics in the religion, talk about the oneness of all things and then becoming one in that oneness of all things. With that, the Sufi mystics do it through the whirling dervish practice. um, the Hindus do it through the practice of yoga, right? The uh, um, and I bet you there's so many lost practices from many other cultures that did the same thing. And with what's happening in the Middle East, we have to take a realistic look at what people think is prophecy and what is actual truth. Okay, so the Zionists that showed up, we're always talking about how Israel is the promised land. Um, they must establish that thing. In fact, I remember this one guy. It had to have been in the late '90s. Yeah, it had to have been in the late '90s because I was in third or fourth grade. Wow. So this guy comes and shows up, and he said he was uh, a Zionist Jew from Israel who was talking to churches around the globe about supporting their cause because Christians support. I mean, it's so weird, like trying to remember this because when I think about it now, it's just propaganda. Like it was like people, the adults around me. That what I remember most is the reaction of the adults around me, and he's talking about this like, well, he doesn't want to admit belief in the Christian Messiah and be a Jew for Christ because that would discredit him amongst his people. But he's coming to believers in Christ to support them because of prophecy or something like that. And so many of the adults were like believed it. They were ready. And I do think that what's happening right now isn't the fulfillment of prophecy, but people who adopted a religious philosophy because they had no identity of their own is trying to force it, the fulfillment of it, so they can be validated. And that terrifies me, to be honest. And one of the most interesting things about one of my journeys is so I don't really I've tried to talk about this before, but I went to Egypt for about 5 days and it was incredible. um I had like the Prince of Egypt kind of like mystical king walk this path, pharaohs walk this path, ancient kings. um and then I opened this was when I was just beginning some of my occult practices. I opened myself up to the energy of the area because I was like, I know this had worked in the woods. It works when like to be one with nature, but I was like seeing if this worked in this area. And when I opened myself up, it was like I saw all the filth and disgust and corruption and lack of care of the area. And there was a fat white kid, tourist, who was climbed on the pyramid next to a sign that said, "Don't climb the pyramids," with a fat fucking guard wielding an Uzi, looking at everyone else, not even caring that this kid is doing anything. And he has a rock and he's breaking off a piece of the pyramid. And then I look around and there's like a little girl holding her little brother, and they look like they're starving. And I look down and I see the Sphinx was really close to the pyramids of Gaza, and I see these fucking fat white whales getting out of this tourist bus and going into the pyramid, the one that was open. And it was like I felt the wrath of ancient kings like hit me, like come upon me. And it was just like, look at this film, like knocked me to the fucking ground. And so I told my tour guide to be like, take me to my hotel room. It was like I had opened myself up and just absorbed this, whatever that was that I experienced. And he takes me to a Bedouin priest, and the priest does this fucking ritual on me and does some prayer and gives me some perfumes and kind of robs me of my I had $400. They wanted me to pay $1,600 for 6 perfumes, and I gave him $400 because that was all I had on me. But then as I'm going back to my hotel room, this guy comes out, like he's like outside of my hotel, and he's like, my friend, I help you. And so like I was like, okay, well, come back in a couple hours. I'm gonna take a nap. So I take a nap, wake up, and I meet this guy, and he's like, I would like to invite you as a foreigner into my house and feed you. And I was like, okay. And just to let you know, this was completely against the advice of pretty much everyone that I got when I was going there. Like, don't stay in your hotel, do that. No, but I've chose the cheapest hotel, which was $45 for 7 days. I ended up riding in the back of a broken down vehicle, paying some guy $200 to drive me to the Library of Alexandria and hang out up there, and to Luxor and let me hang out, do a little tour. Like I totally was very generous with my effort there. And then so this guy invites me to eat at his house and introduces me to his mother, his wife, his children, and even like his little son was like, "Oh, you look like a strong man and an inspiration. Like thank you for coming and having dinner." Like most respectful family I've actually come across in my journeys. And so we're sitting there talking, and I was like, okay, thank you for dinner. I'm gonna go back to my hotel, and maybe we can hang out later, whatever. And he's like, oh, my friend, I'll give you something. I will take you out past dark so you can see the pyramids from the dunes. I was like, okay, that's cool. And every single person I said, don't go outside the walls of Cairo by yourself in the dunes. So I mean, as I was here on this, I was really there on a spiritual journey, and I got more than I bargained for, trust me. And so I was like, okay. So we take some camels and go out a little bit a ways. The camels go down and lay down. And so they're like, okay, look towards the pyramids. And actually, the night was clear, and you could see the alignment of the stars, the great ones over the pyramids. It was, I was honestly, just seeing it in person was astounding. And so I'm sitting there, and they're like, okay, meditate and pray. So I just get down on my knees and basically like a warrior, before his altar, and I just sit there, and I just stare, and I just like, And it was probably about 20 minutes just staring and seeing this tragically beautiful image, because if you look at Cairo, you could see all the half and the beautiful structures that are there, but hidden behind all the half hidden buildings to try to avoid taxes or whatever. And I hear the shuffling of feet, and I look over my shoulder, and the young son has a knife in his hand, and he's looking at me, and I look him in the eye, and I look at this blade, and I look him in the eye, and I just turn back to the pyramids, and I'm like, well, dear God, if this is the end of my life, I probably deserve it because I did murder uh, these people for the U.S. military and helped destroy a significant part of their culture. Like I mean, I take responsibility for my participation, however much I need to, and if that was going to be the end, I accepted it. Like I sat there, and I think we sat there for a long time. Like it felt like almost another 20, 30, 40 minutes even. Um, but then I heard a little bit of whispering, and then kid puts the blade away, and the man comes up to me. He's like, "My friend, we should go back inside. Do you think you have prayed enough?" And I was like, "Yes, I believe I have." um, so we were going back to the gates, and the guard, one of the Uzi guards, stepped out and uh, was like, "I'll let you in for all the money in your wallet." And I was like, "Are you fucking kidding me?" Like, fine. And so like literally had uh I gave up the $400 to uh the Bedouin priest for the perfumes, and then I took out another $400 because that was going to be like my like tourist spending money. I was going to get like shit for my son and like tokens and stuff, and so like I had to give that up, and like I barely had like probably $1,000 in my bank account and before the trip, and so like right there, I go back inside and I check my bank account, and I'm like $150 for the rest of my trip, and I'm like, what the fuck am I gonna do with this? Uh, uh, yeah, it was an adventure, but it gave me a appreciation, and I don't know if God really blessed me or let me survive that, but I was at their mercy, and they showed me greater mercy than my own people have shown me in my journey and adventure. Um, and it's strange because I feel like I have all this validation behind me and all this knowledge that I was given about the current conflict in the world. And so many people are saying, yeah, it's prophecy is being fulfilled, blah, 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 blah. But I don't really think that's how it works. And I think prophecy just means the word of God, right? When we talk about the prophets that come in, like Moses and Jonah and those guys, uh, really what they're doing is being like, this is what will happen if you don't abide by God's word. Like you can either love one another and be kind and get rid of your corrupt ways, or you can be destroyed. And then that's prophecy, right? Telling you the consequences of your actions if you don't get your shit together. And so many people think that it's fortune telling, some sort of divine uh, knowledge of events that will happen. But I read the Kalki Purana. I've read, which is the Hindu end of times, and it's funny how both the Kalki Purana and the Book of Revelations both line up. And this figure, the final incarnation of God in this world, like even when Christ was asked about his return or the return of God, he would say like, it's not going to be me that's back. Like once I leave, I'm gone. I open the way for you. But you're going to have to watch out. And my grandfather would say, he had this one phrase that I thought was interesting. Like, if God sends his son, the Messiah, God who is living amongst mankind, unaware of his own divinity, to experience the life of man, and we kill him, and Christ forgives us in the process of dying, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Whose comes next? That's the Father. And in the Yuli Shaoxuan, which is the divine panorama of Taoist philosophy, the Messiah figure is literally that God who lives amongst his people, separated from himself in knowledge, like enveloped in the illusion of the world. But when God incarnates fully as himself in full knowledge of himself. And I'm not sure, and I feel like there's just a huge difference. Like, maybe Christ was able to do all these things and people knew that he was special growing up. But I don't think that he was like Lord Krishna, who literally popped out of his mother's womb and was like, hey, I'm God and I'm here to fucking fix shit. And everyone knew it, right? So all these people that are fighting in the Middle East for this prophecy for God to appear, to intervene, is really what they're trying to do. They're trying to force an intervention. And these Zionist Jews, who I see as people who have adopted the Judaic faith and are trying to use it and its prophecy to fulfill their own wicked ends, that's the true adversarial religion. The true adversary, the true Satan, wouldn't be someone who is openly opposed to God like the Satanists. So, I mean, that can happen. It's probably happened in ages past or whatever. But really, my grandfather said this, and it stuck out to me. He said, the devil will give you the closest thing to the truth, but a fraction of a hair off. And if we look at all the stuff going on, the white Christians and the white Jews who are apparently had adopted the faith, and the white Christians who are converted to that faith that originated in the Middle East, they're the ones that are forcing the issue in desperation. I feel like this is a move of desperation. And I don't know what else to do but just talk about it. Like, I don't know what else to do but just like kind of try to be a voice in the wilderness, right? And as the last of my line, the last keeper of the knowledge of my and wisdom of my family, I feel so heartbroken. I feel so fucking heartbroken. Like, actually, I went to the hospital on a couple weeks ago, into the emergency room, because I was having sharp pains in my chest, and it was so hard to breathe, and it felt like I was being stabbed. And it's really just, I've got this broken heart, stress-induced cardiomyopathy. And even though I have a strong heart, this grief has just been too much. And this stuff that's going on in the world has just been insane. Isn't it insane that there are people trying to force prophecy from a man who was literally in isolation and insane, who was seeing visions? John the Revelator. and then thinking that it hasn't changed over the last 2,000 years and that they can interpret it, that they know what it is and how it's to be seen. That's a lot of arrogance. And I've read so much, and I've gone to the depths to understand these things, and I still don't get it. Like, I can explain to you encyclopedic knowledge about what other people think about it, but as for myself, like, to me, it just seems like a desperate attempt to be validated in to the point that it's destructive. Um, like I got I could read from the Tao Te Ching. I can go get my I Ching. I can go read from the Bhagavad Gita. I could read other things that show you the way to God, that doesn't involve killing people over a piece of land, of a prophesized uh, Holy Land. Because if we look at like Babylon versus Jerusalem in the book of Revelations, Babylon simply represents the place of decadence. It's not Babylon of the old world. It's the new Babylon, which is just maybe the opposite of utopia. It's a place where it's like hell on earth, where a set few of people benefit from the torture and destruction of others, right? And the New Jerusalem, the perfect city, it is basically utopia, which is the ideal place that we want to live. And when Christ says the kingdom of heaven is within man, he's talking about within our hearts. He's talking about within every single person. And to establish the kingdom of God, we must live what is in our hearts, regardless of the cost or consequence. And when you're, even if you're different than the others, because that's truly what infinity is, an expression of everything. One of my favorite phrases in the Bhagavad Gita is when Lord Krishna is talking to Arjuna, and he says, once thou hast attained spirituality, thou will be indifferent both to the philosophies that thou hast heard and that thou mayest yet hear. When thou stands within the blissful contemplation of the infinite, there is spirituality. And spirituality is the real art of living. And if I was to start a religious movement, I would call it the Gardeners, right? And the reason why I would call it the Gardeners is because my grandfather constantly talked about the work, the parables of Christ that talked about the sowers in the field, and the parable of the master goes to sleep with his servants, and then in the middle of the night, the enemy comes and puts weeds amongst the seeds. And then the workers go out into the fields and sow these seeds and find out that there's weeds amongst them. And then they go back to the master and say, hey, should we just start all over? And again, the master's like, no, we'll let that all grow so that we can pull out the weeds by their roots and throw them in the fire and salvage the harvest. And my grandfather would always encourage me to be a gardener, and a gardener of people, a gardener help people bear the fruits of the Spirit. And how do you do that? You give it to them. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Right? And how are those things given? And then the Buddha talks about the Eightfold Path, right? And the Eightfold Path is simply, right action, right words, right conduct. No different than anything else. The only difference is, where's your mind? And even the Vedas talk about the qualities, purity, passion, and ignorance. All of nature is enveloped within these qualities. And the idea is to overcome them, to separate yourself from them so that you can see creation as it is, so that you can see the creator as being benevolent, so that you can see that we're given a choice. There's no one that's inherently good or bad. Like, that's the idea of the free will. We get to choose our actions. Everything is a choice. There's no such thing as fate or destiny other than death, right? And then we don't know the beginning or end of anything. We don't know when we're going to die. We don't even know when we're going to be born. For many of us, it's like we get born, we fucking grow up, and then we come to this realization that we didn't get a choice to be here, and we got to figure out how to, cross this ocean of life and get to the other side safely. And so many of us just drowned in the illusion of the whole thing that we forget where we're at and what we're doing. And that's the practice of Zen, is really like total concentration and being in the moment, which is, again, goes hand in hand with all the other practices of all the other religions. When one is praying to God in the Abrahamic faiths, you are in the moment. You shouldn't be in the past. You shouldn't be in the future. You should be in the moment, in the present moment, communing with God. Not asking, not saying, "Dear God, please, I wish for this." You can give your hopes up to it, but you have to let go of it. Hopes, desires, fears, all of that. Really, prayer is just communion with God. Meditation is also communion with God or the self, like prayer, and aligning that is within your own heart with the highest. And I don't understand why so many people argue about the process. There's so many different ways to do it. There's so many different ways to succeed, and violence is not one of them. Violence is useless. Violence is horrific. And what's going on in the Middle East should not be happening. Because I don't believe that God's going to come and save anybody. I believe that he's already tried. And it's been 2,000 years, and we should know better. We should. This is what I said when I've talked some publicly a few years ago. And some people say that if it wasn't for me, they wouldn't have come out and they wouldn't have talked about stuff. And I don't think that's true. I don't think that I have a hard time finding that, and I've inspired anyone to do anything. I'm just a penitent man. And my power comes from the knowledge of what I did wrong and my ability to say, I won't let this happen again, and informing people of what it's like doing the act, of participating in the process, bearing witness to it, firsthand experience with it. And then reflection on it so that I can explain it to people and so that they can make a better decision. The hunting down and murdering people with drones is probably the most cowardly way of war that I can think of. And to take it a step further, to use artificial intelligence to do the task for you is like Pontius Pilate wiping his hands clean of the murder of Christ. It's like, well, I didn't do it. And honestly, I don't know what to do. Like, I try to honor my training and my background and even my military experience, because while while the drones were just, my biggest fear is that if I go into the space of dementia like my grandfather, or my afterlife is just me trapped in a fucking box staring at a computer screen for the rest of eternity. But besides that, like my military experience, like I learned a lot about, showing up, accepting fault. Even like there are so many things I accepted fault for that I didn't deserve to have at fault for it. And I remember me standing up for myself in certain situations. Like problems would come up. uh, One of them was my car insurance card had been expired, and then I didn't replace it with a new one. And so I replaced it with a new one. There was no overlap in like uh, break in insurance during that time. It was just I didn't have the new card, and they still punished me for not having the insurance card in my car, because if I had gotten in an accident, it would have had caused trouble. Though it, to the law, all I would have to do is just show my insurance card. And like petty bullshit was like that. And so when they were like punish me, they're like, well, we're punishing you because this could have happened. And I was like, but it didn't. The problem came up, I solved it, and I fixed it. Is there more issue? Because I don't make the same mistake twice. Like I've never, well, I think with women, I make the same mistake 5 or 6 times before I realize that it's a fucking mistake. But uh, in real life, I don't. Um, but I have to attribute that to my teachers in the military. And yes, I've been harsh in my public profiles and in my social medias, but not that I don't think people don't deserve it. I think that they do. It's just you have to ruin your own reputation and express yourself in a way that either someone's going to come along and correct you, or they're going to go away because they feel the shame of the accusation. And hardly anyone ever like steps up to challenge the accusation. Um, so, but it's gotten a lot of bullshit out of my life. But the thing is like I don't know how to acknowledge people without, because I've had several conversations with individuals of being like, well, why is it easier for you to support this person than it is to support me, or to acknowledge my work, or to do all these other things? And the thing that it comes down to is it's because I faced off against the military industrial complex. And even though I won, it's like the military industrial complex will do anything that it can to hurt you. Even if you're in the right, even if you're doing the thing, because for them, just as the Machiavellian principle, the ends justifies the means. Their ends is control and sovereignty, forced sovereignty over others. Um, um, and I don't know. I don't know how to give this information to other people. Like I've intaked this in to be this person. My grandfather was a teacher, my grandpa was a teacher, my mother was a teacher. I can teach certain things, but I feel this sense of responsibility to do something, but I do not know what to do. I do not want to be involved in politics because I do not want to spend time begging people for money to support me doing something. And honestly, with this heartbreak, I don't think I could function in uh, a public office. Like until this heartbreak is healed and goes away, I'm basically left and to just sit here and talk with you about my experiences and how it's affected me, and how I'm trying to get through it. You know, these are therapeutic for me because I got no one else to talk to. I talked to my therapist, but I'm trying to put this information out there so that we can do better. And maybe someday someone will find these things and they'll think them to be useful in betterment of our fucking world, or in some atomic way, maybe. Like, I just don't know. And maybe my viewpoint has some merit. People keep saying that it does, but I don't really feel like people are listening. I really feel like if I was to say what is my duty as an ex-military member and citizen of the United States, it would be to find some sort of harmony and balance and bring that to the rest of my people. Because knowing the harms and atrocities of war, to me, the only response that's applicable or appropriate is one of gentleness. A Unitarian minister at the VA, Chris Antel, I had several conversations with him before my trial, and he's one of the guys that would just say, what would your grandfather do? And my grandfather saw a lot of suffering in the United States in his lifetime. And he still, at the end of his life, was a gentle, loving, caring man. And all I hope is that I can somehow express that through my pain instead of this hate and hurt and misery that I feel. Like, I mean, it's literally killing me. Like, I feel like my body's dying. And the only reason I know this is because I've done the ego death in psychedelics. Like, I've had a significant injury where I felt like I was dying before, and this whole thing in my side, it makes me feel like I'm slowly dying. Like, and I'm trying to focus my chi. I'm trying to center myself and center my breath, and while I am satisfied with myself and all that I've attempted to do, I'm so heartbroken, and I've got nothing and no one to comfort me. And I see what's happening in the world, and I just see forced, desperate fulfillment of religious prophecy, and I'm ashamed of my fellow man, and I'm ashamed of America, and I'm ashamed of white skin that I got, and even though that's my Irish background, my Irish heritage, and I love what the Irish people are doing. Like, good on them standing with the people of Palestine, because this is horrible. And I hope that you find compassion within yourself, any of you that are listening, even my worst enemy, guy who hates me for just trying to do the right thing. I wish you would find compassion within yourself to see the horridness in this, and to see that we were all wrong. We've all been wrong. God is all things, infinite at all times. We don't need to fight each other over divisions of land or anything like that. We just need to be good to one another. And though I'm like spit in the devil's eye type of person, when I read this quote by Mark Twain that in the last 2 centuries, who has forgiven the fallen angel Lucifer? The one who needs it the most, right? And so I guess that's why you love your adversary, is so that you can hope that they realize themselves before it's too late. Um, and I hope that through all this, we find that within ourselves that we can just be open and vulnerable. Express your sorrow, express your hurt, express it. It's okay. See it for what it is and love yourself through it, and love those who are suffering, and loving those that are doing it, but not in the way of excusing them for their actions, but in standing up to them, because standing up to them and saying, you can do better. You're better than this. You can step beyond this selfish attitude. You know, you can do better. But if you don't do better, I will stand up to you. And this is why verse 31 of the Tao Te Ching speaks to me so much, because it says, all tools of violence are detestable by a decent man, but a decent man will know that when the time comes, he will pull his sword with the utmost sorrow and regret, because he understands that the people that he fights against are not demons, but human beings like himself. And so he wades into battle as if attending his enemy's funeral. And right now, the funeral dirge has been sounded. And we must give proprietary acknowledgement to that. And I hope you guys can see that someday through the way that I see it. And I don't know if I'm explaining it well, and I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, but I'm just doing what I can with what little I have. And I'm offering it for free in sacrifice and devotion to my fellow man, because I feel like that's what God the Father, God our Creator and Mother would want. I've learned a lot about forgiveness in the last few weeks, more than I actually expected I would ever have to learn about. You know, you'd think you'd learn it through the process of forgiving throughout your life, but then, this woman I was with for 3 years violated my trust and my heart, and knowing what she was doing behind my back, acknowledging my own hurt, expressing it to her, and then forgiving her through that. It doesn't take the hurt away, but I don't want to feel resentment. And so it's funny because I was talking to people and they're like, "Oh, don't be vulnerable to her. Don't tell her how you feel. Don't tell her how you love or anything like that. It'll just make it worse." And I was like, you know what? Yeah, my past relationships, I've held it in because of fear. When women are they've treated me bad or go away or abuse me, I ended up holding in my feelings and not expressing them and just taking it and trying to be stoic and zen. But I think I found out that that's not the right thing. It's to express them. It's to not react, but to properly channel and focus that expression uh, in a way that releases it from within you. And so, like, I went through the process of explaining to her, like, I miss everything about her. I miss spending time with her. I miss her hair. I miss her, her smile, her laugh. I miss her voice. I miss, her insight when I would ask her questions, and even when I was helping her through her problems and issues and being supportive. Like, I miss those types of things. But then when I look back on it, I rarely was ever given anything in return. My woundedness and my from the abuse in my past relationships created this person in me that I I was capable of giving, but in my moment of grief and vulnerability over the loss of my best friend and my dog, she left and broke up with me and went after someone who was just waiting to be with her, you know, in the side. So where I was giving devotion and love and all these types of things, like trying to fix my spirit, like like even the black magic that I did to myself to like trying to fix these things. Like, I went through this whole process. Like, she was like, well, I'm not, I think someone else told her this, like, that I was trying to get her to fix me, but I didn't want her to fix me. I was fixing myself. I am fixing myself. I've been fixing myself. I just needed her support and love and kindness and loyalty and devotion, the same that I was giving to her, that I trusted she had, but she didn't. Because obviously we had different, even though I would question her about these things, about loyalty, integrity, and all these types of things, she must have had a wildly different internal definition of it, because sharing pictures of yourself online behind my back is not loyalty or faithfulness, you know? And I don't know if it's like childhood trauma or that she's a narcissist, but when God, I did so much deep research. Like, we all have our issues. And I don't think that she is a narcissist because she's kind and caring, but I realize that she doesn't have to think outside herself because social media has programmed her to be, but also her internal isolation from her family and all that growing up did something as well. So sit there and excuse it, because we all got shit we're working through, and all we got to do is just support each other through it and hope that we're getting through it, right? But uh, I was just a fool. And I don't hate her. I just I love her, even if it's just imaginary image, because that love is not dependent on the reality of her. It depends upon what I'm capable of expressing. And I am determined that through this pain and through this heartache, I am still capable of expressing love, because that, I would rather feel that than hate. And I definitely know that I am capable of great hate, but I am a magi, like my grandfather before me. And though our trials and tribulations are different, I still uphold the same traditions that he passed on to me, that maybe someday I'll pass on to other people. And I've proven myself over and over again. I mean, do I need to hold this up again? But I still don't know what to do. My own country and my own hometown, the people hate me in it. And I haven't really been invited anywhere freely. So I guess I'll just sit and watch the world burn and hope that we come through the other side. Be a great doer of action, a great enjoyer of delight, and a perfect renouncer.